Oli London is an expert on gender ideology and one of the more well known detransitioners on the internet. He has had over 32 surgeries in his quest for perfection and had a really interesting wake up call that he writes about in his new book called Gender Madness: One Man's Devastating Struggle with Woke Ideology and His Battle to Protect Children. I'm pleased that he's joined us on the show today. Thank you so much for coming.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, I know you from Twitter, and so I decided to pick up your book, and I did enjoy it. I finished it over the weekend. I found it to be fascinating because your story really validates a lot of the common themes around gender ideology that the left wants to deny. So, homosexuality, internet addiction, and an uneven social support system because you had an absent father. Well, I don't know if we'll use the word absent, but maybe less supportive
Mm.
than you would have liked. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Why do you think these topics are not the first things addressed when it comes to gender ideology, but instead swept under the rug?
Well, they really should be the first things that are talked about because we have to look at when these children are being diagnosed with gender dysphoria. It's very dangerous. They're being put on hormones and puberty blockers, but doctors aren't analyzing why does this child feel confused? What is the driving force behind this? Is it an issue in the family home? Are they a subject to being bullied and they want to transition to try and fit in and gain attention? Is there something else? Are these kids struggling with autism or depression or another kind of condition that is giving them these thoughts? Because, doctors, unfortunately, they don't check at these things anymore. They just say, oh, if you're questioning your gender, you are definitely a candidate to transition. And then they fast track these kids. So, these are issues that I've been through myself. And I think it's very important for parents to be aware that, there are underlying issues that do really, really push these kids to feel confused with their gender.
Now, one of the things I think you drive home so well that I think people who are for gender affirming care just altogether ignore is that it's painful to do this to a human body. You really open up to the ways that you suffered for surgeries and trying to fit into clothes that were not made for you, trying to fit into groups that, like, it's painful emotionally and physically. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think you did a great job of that with the book.
Yeah, it's all consuming. So people that struggle with their gender identity, that's all they really think about from the moment they wake up to the moment they sleep. It's very difficult to live a normal, healthy life and, interact with social groups and, even get work hard at a job because you are so consumed by these thoughts of, I am not good enough. I hate the way I look. I despise my body. So this really is all consuming, and it's very sad. It's very similar in the way to anorexia and bulimia because the person that is struggling with anorexia, they are consumed by these thoughts, and that's all they think about. No matter what other people tell them, they never feel good enough inside. So it's about kind of having a warped image of self. So I spoke a lot about that in the book, and how I really struggled to accept myself through my teen years, through to adulthood. And how I eventually overcame that when I learned that what we need to learn what's inside. We need to love what's inside. We need to, deal with these past traumas head on, think about them, and think how can we move on from this, and how can we be healthy because it consumes your mind, it consumes your body, and it really is sad to see so many kids, losing themselves in this gender ideology.
Now, what do you think grabbed you later in life to lob onto transgender identity? Because you were a full grown adult. And so, were there certain themes on the internet? Was it sold as a solution to certain problems? Why do you think, what is it do you think was so sticky?
Well, so I had very, very bad body dysmorphia as a teen, and I was used to get bullied. So I really had an issue with my self-image. So that obviously into adulthood, I'd always been more feminine than other boys. But into adulthood, I started to just have surgery to try and transform myself and try to make myself feel better. And the more things you do to yourself, the more addicted you get to that, and then the more extreme it gets, the further along you go. So it really became an addiction to trying to change myself beyond repair. And then, I was a big social media user. Now I just really use Twitter, but before I was all day on Instagram, all day on TikTok. You're always comparing yourself to others. And then when you suddenly start to see, throughout the pandemic, you start to see constant videos of people sharing these different identities, very unusual identities, and all sorts of things. Then you have these trans videos that are constantly pushed on the TikTok algorithm. You have, Dylan Mulvaney always appears on everyone's algorithm. He did block me at one stage, but I was being fed those videos every day, and you think, this person seems really happy. And we have to realize for many of these people, they are really suffering inside. So it's a facade. So, I thought that I could be happy, and by changing my gender identity, that would be the answer to all of my problems. And it's really not. It's just, you're running away from your problems instead of actually addressing them.
Yeah, it strikes me like any other life-changing paradigm. You think, "Oh, this is it. This is what I've been meant." And then you realize it sort of reminded me of about 4 years ago, I decided I didn't want to drink anymore. Now I rarely, if ever, drink. And I thought, "Oh, this is going to really, make my life so different from here on out." And my life is still pretty much as hard as it was before, and it's easy, it's a lot the same. It's just I have to cope with those things differently. And so, once you get something, you have a honeymoon phase with it, like with non-drinking is my comparison. And I assume that with transgender ideology, you might have this honeymoon phase where you think, this is it, what I've been looking for. And then you have to face something hard. That was very much the case in Chelsea Manning's biography as well. And so, but what you say is that this honeymoon phase ends for a lot of people, and we ignore those people who detransition, right?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced this honeymoon phase after I had my facial feminization surgeries. Then I got the hair extensions and all of the women's clothes. So, no, you feel great because what happens in this honeymoon phase is you get so much validation and positive reinforcement. So, all the people around you, society, are rewarding you for going through this change. They are celebrating you as some brave hero. Because you've simply said that you're a different gender. And I think that is, very harmful in a sense because it encourages behavior. So for me, for instance, I lacked validation for much of my life. So when I suddenly had people praising me and saying, "You look beautiful, this is who you're meant to be," it reinforces that way of thinking. So it's kind of dangerous to have that because it pushes you further down this route, and it can push you through more extremities. You might start taking hormones or surgeries because you are being rewarded and told by people this is the right thing for you. So that is very harmful. But once this honeymoon phase is over, a lot of people don't look to the future. So we see so many young people, they want something right now. They don't think about the long-term consequences, and that's the issue with medically transitioning. Is because kids think this is going to fix my problems. As soon as I have this surgery, I'm going to be a happy person. Suddenly, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be like Cinderella. I'm happy, But it's simply not like that. These effects wear off. And then, you start to realize that, this didn't actually fix my problems, and maybe I'm running away from something. Maybe I should have addressed these other issues that I'm dealing with instead of going down this really irreversible route.
Yes. Now, you say you never used women's bathrooms because you had this innate understanding that you were essentially not a part of that group, that you should not have been given access to those spaces. And now you speak out on behalf of those spaces. Can you speak more about that? Because that seems like something that we are told you should have had access to when you had the costume.
Well, even though I transitioned, I knew I was trans, so I knew I wasn't a biological woman. So, I did have some common sense. And I've always respected women. I've always, most of my friends are women. I was very close to my mum, so I've always had respect for women. And, I know it makes them uncomfortable having a biological male, regardless of how they look, going into their space. So I knew that was respectful, but it was also kind of funny. So when, I go to the men's restrooms, people would think I was in the wrong restroom because I did look very feminine and stuff. And they would kind of say, "Excuse me, ma'am, you're in the wrong restroom." I'm like, "No, no, I'm a guy." So, you do have that confusion,
Oh.
but at the end of the day, it was about respect because women do not feel comfortable having somebody enter their space, that's born biological male. So I did have that distinction, even though I believed I was a trans woman. I knew there is a distinction between biology, and I think that's a very important thing. A lot of trans activists seem to miss these days. Is look, if you're going to identify a certain way, nobody really has an issue with that, but you have to remember that you cannot change biology, and you're also not entitled to the rights of women just because you say that you're a woman and believe you are one.
Yes, but that experience also seems sad for you too, to have to explain that to a man in the bathroom. And so I think that speaks to a need maybe for third spaces. Do you have any opinion
Mm.
about that?
I mean, I definitely think there should be something, because it's nice for everybody to be happy. Everybody should feel comfortable, using a space. But I don't think the thing right now is having biological males in women's spaces is fair at all for women. So, like you said, a third space option or just a gender neutral option for whoever feels comfortable using that. Or just, a single space toilet, instead of just having women's or men's, just have like single space so it's for
Yeah.
whoever. But I don't think the approach right now is helpful for anyone, because even you have genuine trans people, they are getting upset, they don't know what to do, and women are getting upset, so you have to have some kind of third option to please everyone.
Yes. And especially when my son got older and was not old enough to go into the bathroom by himself, but I was
Mm,
bringing him, then there's an age that's such a gray area and you're not sure if it's appropriate or not, but I wouldn't want him to go alone in certain places.
mm.
So yes, that might serve us all without these questions. Uh, Now you spend a lot of time. Actually, no, I want to back out a little bit because I had not been aware of your background as a K-pop artist. And you talk a lot about how, originally you started to have surgeries to ascribe more to the Korean aesthetic for your career. And what struck me is how these two things are not that different, this constant pursuit to mold yourself into something new. And that has to just be really exhausting. Always being in a fight with your natural state, or always saying like this needs to be changed, or what have you. It would seem that we've lost our way at telling people to accept themselves as they are, as they age, as they, their own culture and things like that. And so this has sort of led you into a career that's also talking about social decay in other ways. Can you speak to that natural evolution?
Yeah, so I really did battle for so long, and I was very confused. I basically wanted to erase any semblance of who I was. I wanted to look like a completely different person. So I used to live in South Korea, and there's so much pressure out there to look a certain way. They do over 1 million plastic surgery procedures a year. So, everybody in that society has surgery in order to succeed, in order to feel confident and happy. So, there's tremendous pressure. So that's when I started going for that aesthetic. I was going to Korean doctors and getting that aesthetic. It, made me feel great for a while. Then I realized, I still wasn't happy. Am I misplacing these issues? And then that's when obviously questioning my gender identity came along, because I was like, I'm still not happy. Why have I not achieved happiness? So I thought, maybe I all my struggles are because of the gender thing. But now I've kind of looked at the world. I've analyzed it from taking a step back. I used to be a part of that kind of woke world. I wasn't like super woke like these trans activists, but I was part of that woke world, super liberal. And, I've taken a step back now, and I see that there is a general attack on the young generations to basically destroy them. They have no real chance, because you see all of this woke culture. You have all the critical race theory being pushed in schools, mixed with the gender ideology being pushed on very young schools. And you have that, and then you have crime is increasing. A lot of kids these days, they just want to become influencers. So so many kids now are, I quote it in a study in the book, about 25% of kids want to become an influencer as a career. And that is not a sustainable career for many people. Kids just seem to think that, oh, I can get famous online, make loads of money and sustain yourself. It doesn't work that way. It's actually really, really difficult. So this is the generation that we live in now. They are obsessed with social media. They have very short attention spans. So with the social media, obviously comes an increased pressure to want to change yourself. So not only with changing their gender, but you also see a lot of kids not feeling happy with the way they look and wanting to change themselves. They see filters, they see celebrities. So you also have this increase of young people wanting plastic surgery. They are being conditioned to believe that they are never good enough. They are never going to look good in this life. They're never going to get anywhere unless they become famous. So that's kind of a sad thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, it is. And I think you did a really good job of speaking to what that's like, to, going through the looking glass, I want to say, realizing that, this path doesn't have to lead to sort of a general social decay. You speak a lot for Gays Against Groomers, and other LGBT organizations that do not involve trans ideology, because those things, those are two separate, disparate groups. Even the part where you talk about how you had a hard time finding relationships as a gay man because your partners found you too feminine. So then you thought, well, maybe this is not homosexuality. Maybe I'm just supposed to be a woman, which is in a way antithetical to homosexuality as a thing, right? And so I really appreciated that contradiction and how confusing that must be. So I would just want to thank you for sharing this story. Where can we find you online? And do you want to tell us any more about the book before I let you go?
Thank you. Yes, so I posted all on Twitter about exposing gender ideology, sharing news stories about what's going on in different legislation. So Twitter is at Oli London TV, and everybody can get the book right now. It's on Amazon.com and all other book retailers. It's also available on an ebook version. Audiobooks out on September 1st. And the book is really, talking about my struggles, but it's a story for everyone. Anyone that's got questions about themselves, whether it's gender or anything else, this book is about motivating people to get out of that dark mindset where you feel trapped, that you feel that you need to change all the time, and just learn to self-love. I think that's a really key message in the book. The second half of the book is all about kind of my research on studies out there that counter the claims made by these gender clinics, because they all too often like to say there's very limited number of detransitioners, this is safe, it's effective, there's no harmful effects. But I've actually got all the studies in my book that counter these claims and actually say, look, most teens grow out of this. We are misdiagnosing thousands of teens that are autistic. They are being transitioned, instead of actually saying, look, they're struggling with their autism, how can we support them? So, I'm talking about that in the book, and it's really a book for everyone, whether you're young and struggling or questioning yourself, whether you're a parent and you want to know the best approach to speak with your kid and try to make sure they're okay. Because, it's every parent's worry these days is, if their kid goes through this, it's really emotional for all of them. So trying to help them navigate that. And, it's really a helpful book for everyone. So, yeah, Gender Man is available on all bookstores.
Right. And we didn't touch on your Christian awakening, which is also a fantastic story in the book that I'll just not give it away. We'll leave that as a cliffhanger. But you wrote it when you were, it was pretty fresh in your mind. As you say, you had bottom surgery scheduled for 2023, this year. So you're not that far out of the clutches of this. And so I appreciate that you wrote it in this time and we're able to share this. So it really was a pleasure to talk to you. Hopefully we can talk again sometime. Thank you so much for coming on Redacted.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.